Welcome to another Synchronet tutorial. I'm your host, Digital Man, otherwise known as Rob Swindell. So as I was preparing for the next Synchronet release, version 3.20, I was thinking it might be a good idea to include a new command shell. If you're not familiar with what a command shell is, that is kind of the persona or theme look and feel of the BBS when you log in. The command shell is what's accepting keys from the user, keystrokes or string commands, and operating on them, displaying menus, prompts, invoking other scripts or programs, invoking internal functions of the BBS. And Synchronet, by default comes with a number of command shells. These are the default set. We were just looking at the classic command shell, which has been pretty much unchanged for Synchronet's history and closely kind of mimics the look and feel of WWIV. But if you switch to another shell, like this is the simple or novice shell that I created, it's a lot fewer commands. The commands are string inputs, so you have to hit enter, because back in the day, people were used to having to hit enter after every command. So that's what this shell does. And it just has a lot fewer options, and it's less intimidating for somebody who's never used a BBS before. But if somebody has used a BBS before and they're familiar with another BBS software, say PC board, then it's kind of cool to have like a clone of that BBS software. So a lot of these shells come with Synchronet. I created, I think, most of them, and I just kind of stole screens from these competing BBS programs and then made, as much as I could, Synchronet work like that BBS software. So here's PC board, and to go to files, you hit F, and then you hit enter, and then you select an area, I guess, or maybe you're always in file mode, I think. You are file directories, that's it. So you always, you don't have a separate file area. It's like all in the same menu there. To open a door, you type open, and then you get a door menu, or you can type open and then the name of the door that you want to open, and it goes straight to that. So here's the BBS list as an example. And then each one of these has different command keys. So like the key to change your configuration here in PC board, it's W. So those are command shells, and each user can choose their own command shell based on what's available on that particular BBS made available by the sysop. And generally the set of shells hasn't changed much in a long, long time. So I thought maybe it'd be good to add another shell and have it be an example of how to write shells in JavaScript. For a long time, shells were only written in Baja, which is an ad hoc language created for Synchronet version 2. And I'll show you, this was the default command shell in Baja, is sort of that classic Synchronet shell. Although the comment says here for version 2.00a, this code actually would only compile with a newer Baja. So if you actually tried to use this with 2.00a, this code right here wouldn't exactly compile. Baja language is kind of a cross between BASIC and assembler and C, kind of a weird hybrid of those three. We do have a manual for Baja, and it's pretty outdated. It's been really replaced by JavaScript in all respects with Synchronet, but there are still some old shells and other modules that are written in Baja, so we still maintain compatibility, but we don't really enhance the ability to, do more things with the language or invoke more things in the BBS itself via Baja. And one of the things I did for this release was rewrite the default shell in JavaScript. So this is the default shell in Baja. You can see it's about 868 lines. There's some comments in there, obviously. And this is the same shell in JavaScript. Now, granted, it does use a library I also created called shelllib, but the total of this size is about 258 lines, so about a third the size. And most of it's data, these tables of commands and corresponding functions to invoke, or maybe print some text or something, but it's mostly data, these tables. And let me go ahead and open that shelllib, since that's also representative. And a lot of the functions it's invoking are part of this shelllib, and they're common among multiple shells. That's why it's a library for shells. Again, it's only 500 or so lines. You don't have to use this, but if you were going to write your own Synchronet command shell in JavaScript, you probably would want to. Some of this functionality was hard-coded in the BBS. It actually still is, for when you invoke via Baja function. And rather than replicate that code and make it available in JavaScript, we just rewrote it in JavaScript rather than having it in native C code. Well, my thoughts were that I would emulate one of the elite hacker BBS software of the era, like forum hacks, for example. These were very popular among pirate BBSs and among like ANSI graphics scene BBSs. There was a lot of emphasis on the look and the ability to rebuild, like modify the code and rebuild. So these are all written in Pascal. They originally derived from Ken Duda's Forum PC BBS software. And there's a whole bunch of these, a ton of lineage here described in this page on the BBS documentary, BBS software database. And the ones that I had heard of, most familiar with, I guess, probably would be like Celerity, Vision X, Vision 2, Oblivion 2, LSD, and apparently Vision was derived from LSD. I think maybe Oblivion was as well. I thought it was funny reading up about this and about Emulex, that its sort of claim to fame was that it could emulate other BBSs, and that's really what Synchronet version 2 is trying to be able to do, right? With Baja and all the programmability, was being able to emulate other BBS programs without modifying the BBS source code itself. Of course, Synchronet was not open source at that time, and had no plans to release the source again at that time, but wanted individual users of the BBS to be able to choose their own look and feel, which I ended up calling a command shell. So that's what I did with the Baja in version 2. So I'm not sure how similar that is with Emulex, but it's kind of the same idea that it can emulate other BBSs. So like I showed earlier, we had default command shells for WWIV clone, PC board, Wildcat, Major BBS, Renegade, and some other shells have been written since that are more modern and cool, and written in JavaScript, in fact. So I was trying to find BBSs that were running today using some of these forum hacks of the early mid-90s, and I really couldn't find any. Like a Telnet BBS guide, if you filter based on software and you put in one of the names of one of those forum, and don't confuse that with forem. Apparently that's something different, FOREM. But you put in something like Oblivion 2, for example, which was a forum hack. Instead, you're going to find a broken BBS that's actually, I think, supposed to be running some other like reimagining or a brand new development of a clone that work alike, and not actually the forum hack itself, Oblivion 2. So although it says here Oblivion 2, it's not actually Oblivion 2. It's some other thing that kind of looks like Oblivion. So I couldn't really find any forum hacks to like steal menu files. I mean, obviously I can install the software and steal the ANSI files like that and make it work like that. But I wanted to see them live. I wanted to see what they look like, and hopefully a stock forum hack that look good out of the box. I really didn't find anything. But funny, when I was searching for that, what I did find were some shells that were written for Synchronet version 2 that emulate some of those elite BBSs. So like here's an elite command shell, elite shell. These are actually different shells. They both kind of pick the same name, but there's one in here that caught my attention, was the Vision 2 shell by Dojo. I mean, this is written right when version 2.0 came out, pretty much that same year anyway. We had kind of a burst of a bunch of command shells, and here's one that's emulating Vision 2 BBS software. I took a look at the menus for this, and it looked pretty cool. It doesn't look bad, but, kind of the style was, just from looking at the menus anyway, looked pretty similar to maybe any other, Synchronet stock command shell. But still, it came with the source for the Baja module, which you can now decompile Baja modules using a program called unbaja, but it's so nice to have the original source. And, it seemed like it was derived from my original stock default shell from the time. And so I'd be familiar with it, and this seemed like a good starting point. And then I recall there was an Oblivion 2 shell as well, and I came across that again. There might be a lot more. I certainly don't know of all the command shells out there or have them all on my BBS. I would hope so, but I may not. It reminded me of this Oblivion shell here, Synchronet Oblivion 2 clone shell. And there's 2 versions of it here. So we'll take a look at the original. Yeah, this one says that it has the March 14th date, is actually newer than the one that has the March 24th date from the same year, because these are actually published earlier than this. So I'm not sure why they have the dates, the actual file dates are different, but we look at the content of the file. So let's do that. We can extract these and look at like their documentation. So once I found these shells and I started, kind of looking at their contents. Yeah, so this is actually a modification of the Vision 2 shell. Although, only a little bit of credit is given here at the end. Most of this content almost entirely the whole shell, except for the menus themselves, is the Vision 2 shell. And this, as well as this this doc here, I decided, that's really the Dojo BBS sysop that did this, not Xord here. So Xord really just updated the menu files so that they looked like Oblivion 2 rather than Vision 2. And I don't think it made really much change to the shell files themselves, the source. But we can, kind of compare those. And if you notice, the file name here is OVB, whereas Oblivion 2 is usually abbreviated OBV. So it just seems like there was a typo at some point, and then it just propagated all the way into the source code and the directory structure. And I don't know, maybe it was a joke. But that should be OBV2, not OVB2. Now if I look at the menu files in here, they look a little more different. They look more of the forum hacks that I remember of the time. Again, I think, the source is very similar. So here, we'll just compare the source between these two. And so you can see the original was by Yojimbo of the Dojo BBS. Sorry, I didn't remember your name offhand. And then it was updated to more emulate Oblivion 2 by Xord for Neocom BBS. And so you can see he updated the paths for the menu files, and then the prompt colors a little bit, went from blue to green. These are Control-A codes, they're kind of hard to read. The internal code of the BBS list, the H command does something different. And he's got added the minute bank, and then, not sure, he wanted to, change your password, I see. He stuffed W into the Vision 2 shell stuffed W into the keyboard buffer and then called user defaults. There's certainly better ways to set the user password now. And then, prompt, menu files, batch, editing or listing. He's stuffing keys into the keyboard buffer, so forcing commands. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's the Vision 2 shell with very few modifications, some color changes and some command changes. So most of the credit needs to go to Yojimbo of the Dojo BBS, but I do like these menus better. And I recall getting more sysops asking me about Oblivion 2, like display file compatibility and stuff like that at the time. So this shell, I think, was pretty popular for its time. Now, between version 2 and version 2.1 of Synchronet, made some pretty fundamental changes to Baja and really moved to more of a multi-file project type design where you include other files to define a bunch of constants in particular. And that's detailed in this Baja2 new.txt file, something that probably needs to be put on the wiki, but it kind of goes through all the changes in Baja version 2, which was added in Synchronet version 2.1. So before that, it was Baja version 1. And importantly, down here at the bottom, we have incompatibilities with Baja version 1 source. And so, unfortunately, a lot of those shells that you're going to find out there on the internet, hopefully they come with source code, but even if they don't, they're patchable. But especially if they come with source code and you try to build them with Baja, you're going to run into some errors. So to demonstrate that, so we have the Oblivion shell here. We'll try to build it, because obviously it comes with the bin. The bin is the output, the binary output of it, but we want to be able to make changes, so we want to be able to rebuild it ourselves. So if we build it, and immediately we get an error, and the reasons for these errors are all explained right here in this incompatibilities section. So that's really what I want to go through in this tutorial, is updating old shells to work with modern versions of Synchronet, and then ultimately even taking it further and rewriting all the Baja stuff in JavaScript. But let's just start with just getting them to work in a modern Synchronet for your BBS, hopefully. If you have your own shells that are old or you downloaded some off the internet, this tutorial should help you out. Let me go ahead and follow kind of the instructions for this. If we look at the install file for this, part 1 is to put all the related menu files in the OVB2 subdirectory. So the menus are the display files, and that's going to be ANS, ASC. Those are all the display files in here. So you go to your text menu directory and you create this OVB2 directory like it tells you to. Now it does tell me to create it all uppercase here, but again, we're modernizing, so I don't really want it to be all uppercase like that. And then it says we want to copy the menu files there. So I think that will select everything. There we go. So now we have our menu files, and if we look at these, you can see that like the ANS files are color, and if you look at the equivalent in ASC, then it's black and white. It's not just ASCII though. It does contain these CP437, code page 437 characters, or extended IBM extended ASCII characters, but it is all black and white. So, you know, I don't know. We probably won't end up using these files. There's better ways to automatically translate for different terminals. But we'll go ahead and start with this set of menu files. And we'll worry about just the shell code itself for first. All right, and then the next step is edit the source file and put the bin into your exec directory. All right, so now I'm in my exec directory, and I'm going to copy the OVB2 source file. And you see it's uppercase. We'll start with that. Okay, we won't rename it just yet because I want to demonstrate an issue there. But the issue is really only going to happen on Unix-based file systems. So we will test it there and see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate all the problems building this old source file. And you see here we do get an error, and it talked about this expecting integer constant on line 13, it found the word main, and it's expecting an integer constant. So if we go back to our list of changes here, and then we pull up the source code as well for this script. Notepad defaults to thinking it's some other language, so we'll just say none. It does not have syntax highlighting for Baja, not that popular of a language. And then we'll go to line 13. And it's a node action main, and if you look here, node action function requires inclusion of node defs, and action parameters were changed with the word node underscore in front of it, prefixed. So we need to change both of that. So to start with, we could include node defs. We do that with a bang include and then node defs.inc. But I know for a fact that there's going to be other definitions needed, and we have a kind of a parent include file called SBBS defs, which automatically includes node defs and user defs. If we look at that file, it'll make it more obvious. But if you go to SBBS defs, sbbsdefs.inc, it's a Baja include file, and you can see the first thing it does is include node defs and user defs and error no.inc, and then defines a bunch of other numeric constants. So we'll just skip the problem solving step there, and for the other include issues as well, we'll just include SBBS defs. Get them all. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't affect the performance of the script or anything. This is just a build time include. Next step, we will try to build it again. Now it's a different line number because we added the include, and it's still complaining about the same thing about main because I didn't resolve the node main issue here. See where it says it needs node main? Let me see. So anywhere we see node action, we'll just search for that, and then we need to add node in front of it. All right, and we added the prefix. So hey, now we get a different error on line 16, expert. It doesn't recognize expert. And on line 16, it's calling compare user misc. And if we look here in the changes, compared user misc requires the inclusion of user defs, which we know we're already getting from SBBS defs. And the miscellaneous attributes were changed in the prepended with underscore. And so this is kind of a namespace thing. Like you don't want to have too many names that will, they possibly collide. So you start adding prefixes, and that's where that came from. So since we're user misc, and we'll just go ahead and look for all the other user misc instances. And we got cold keys, that's the opposite of hot keys, which is what everybody usually wants. So everywhere you see that, and we'll just go ahead and do a search and replace here. So everywhere we see user misc cold keys, we'll change it to user misc cold keys, replace all. And then we'll look what other user misc changes we've got. Oh, more expert changes, so we'll change all those. And we got compares and toggles, so we want to just go ahead and search from user underscore misc on. So we get both the compares and the toggles included in that search and replace. And then we're going to change that to use expert, replace all. And then let's give that a build attempt and see what happens, see what our next error is. Okay, line 136, it's expecting an integer constant. Instead it got end of line. So we'll look at 136. 136 is a call to print file. And if you look here, it says print file function requires first argument to be in quotes if it's not a variable. And this is not a variable. This is a string constant, but it's not in quotes. So this was a new change. So now we need to look for everywhere there's print file, and we need to put these things in quotes. These are this argument. All right, I think those are only calls to print file. Now, I recall that check file is the same issue, but we'll go ahead and discover that through an error. All right, line 170, same thing. So everywhere we call check file, that argument needs to be in quotes too. Check file, that checks for a file's existence. All right, there's only two calls. Compile it again. All right, different error. All right, new scan, and this is line 675. All right, so line 675, it's toggling the user misc new scan. Now, this one I already looked into, and this is just a typo by the original developer. It wasn't caught by the compiler, I guess, but this was not actually a name supported, even by Baja version 1. The correct name of this setting is ask scan. So if we look at the Baja manual, we search for scan, we'll see it right here. Ask scan, and it's prefixed by underscore now. So that's the correct spelling, basically, of this options. ask scan. And that means that when that setting is set, the user logs in, it'll ask the user whether or not they want to search for their messages to them, any messages posted to them. Otherwise, they have to initiate a command to do it. It won't, they won't get prompted to do it. Not sure that's actually what this Command Z should do. I'm not too familiar with Oblivion 2 or what Command Z does, but we'll at least fix this Baja build issue by fixing that. Hey, look at that. Totally fixed all the issues, right? It builds. So now we have a bin file. Again, OVB2 is a misspelling, but it should be OBV2, but we'll worry about that later. And it generated a bin file. It's about 2.2 kilobytes. And the next step would be to install this as a command shell on the BBS. And you do that with SCFG, kind of command shells. And then you can just add another one here. And you can call it Oblivion 2 clone. And the internal code, we want to match the file name there. So it's OVB-2. So the base file name of that shell is OVB-2, so that's what we need our internal code to be as well. And since we're testing this, we don't want anybody else to have access. I'm going to go ahead and set the requirements to sysop, so no other regular users will see this shell, just me. And now when I log in, I should be able to have that as an option. So we just need to log off and back in. So now I should have the option to select that new shell from the menu. I do. Oblivion 2 clone. Cool. And I'm not seeing anything. I hit enter, nothing. I do recall that K is the configuration command, K. And I want to make sure I'm in not in expert menu mode. So expert menu mode is off. Good. But it's not displaying any of the menus. T is what? Transfers, and then M is messages. So it is switching sections and stuff, and like G would log me off, but I'm not getting any of the menus. So let's go back and look at the script itself. Now, I do want to take a quick aside here in that there was a newer version of this shell that was updated by someone named Beavis, and I forgot to kind of analyze that and show it to you. So I do want to do that. So I'm going to take an aside here quickly. So you see here that there was an update by Beavis. He edited it to work with Synchronet version 2.2x. So we'll go ahead and download this one. I just kind of want to show you the changes that this Beavis made. This is the one that was supposedly updated to work with the newer Synchronet. The original was written for 2.0. This was updated to work with 2.2. It claims. So let's quickly compare the original source with this one, OVB2 source. And so these are the changes that Beavis made. You can see he hard-coded the parameter denote action to 1. I don't even know if that's the correct value, if that equates to main or not. Probably. And then he changed the call to user, compare user misc expert to compare ARS expert. That might work, because I think that's actually a valid ARS keyword. But cold keys is definitely not a valid ARS keywords. So that's going to do compare against like level 0 or something, because that's not even a valid integer and defaults to level keyword. So I don't know. But I mean, you see, he did do the quoted arguments to print file. That's correct. Same changes we just showed. But this change of, going from compare user miss to compare ARS was not really quite the correct path. He needed to include that .inc file I showed and use the proper names for those constants, which apparently he didn't see that baha2 new.txt file and just hacked away on it. And my experience was those changes didn't really work, so I wasn't going to show you that shell. But just to kind of raise your awareness, some people did hack away on some of these shells to make them work, and probably with varying degrees of success. But we're going to do it the right way. So right now, we're not seeing the menu files. And if I look back through here, this is the source we're currently editing. And when we're not in expert mode, which my user is currently not in expert mode, it calls menu, and it's got \OV2 \main. And main is the correct name of the file, but I don't think that's correct, having this prepended slash like that. And the backslashes themselves are going to cause a problem for Linux and any other Unix-like OS system. So we would want to change that to a / as well, but I'll get to that. So to begin with, let's just go ahead and take out that first backslash. See if that fixes that issue. I'll go ahead and log off. So /g work? Okay. Back in. Hey, there we go. So for whatever reason, having that first slash worked fine with earlier versions of Synchronet, but does not work with current versions of Synchronet. So if you look at the actual documentation, Baha documentation for the menu command, I think it makes this pretty clear and has some examples. I think a menu function. All right. Yeah, so it gives an example. Menu, simple, \main, and it shows it in quotes too. So really, the proper syntax is to be in quotes. And certainly if you wanted like to use a path that had spaces in it or something, I think you would definitely have to have it in quotes for that to work correctly. But yeah, I think that initial slash there worked okay apparently with Synchronet version 2.0, but probably nothing after that. And certainly not with the current version 3.x. So everywhere we call menu and then \, we want to change that to just menu. So menu \ menu space. And I'll just replace all those. All right. And then recompile that. We really do need to log off and back on again. I think there's a way to toggle shells and have it reload the shell. I don't know if it didn't work correctly, but okay. So that's our main menu. That's a feedback. We see T is transfers, so that's pretty cool. I like how the menu changes. And credit to Xord here. He's the one that did these menus, I think, or at least stole them from Oblivion. There's a message menu. Yeah. What else do we got? Chat, or no? That's change group. Let me see. There's something called a quick menu. Q, quit to main. I'm not really sure why. Quickie menu. And it's got this broken ANSI sequence you can see here. If you see something like this, you can just edit the file, but just to confirm. So if we hex dump that, text menu ovb2 quick, it's just called quick.ans, and we look at the very first sequence of this file, it's escape open ? And then another escape open 255D. So it's just like a broken sequence. It's expecting a sequence terminator there, which would be like a letter. And yeah, I don't know, whatever editor he used put some garbage in the top of this file, or maybe they hand edited it after they created it and didn't know exactly how to remove a full sequence. So that's a kind of a bug in this display file. And you want to fix that. We could do that with Notepad, I think, or Notepad++, or VI, whatever. I'll do it in text menu, quickie. There we go. Escape open ? That is not a valid ANSI escape sequence. We'll just cut that out of there. And now we display the file. So now the menu, or that menu displays correctly. And what other files are in that directory? We can look at the other menu files. Text menu ovb2. Email. And Q2BK. So if we go to the email menu, there we go, OVB2 email, okay, that looks kind of cool, and then message, and then O for Q2BK, for O for offline reader, I suppose. And then you see how it's doing that pause because it's about to clear the screen. That should be fixed. And then, yeah, I don't see a Q2BK menu coming out of this thing. Q2BK.message is the one that's displaying. Right? So we look at Q2BK.ans. That's what we should be seeing. Go back to the instructions. It probably has you copying and overriding that, maybe, because there's a way to set the subdirectory for menus that get called like by other like internal Synchronet functions, and I don't think they knew or using that. So going back to the documentation for this, no mention of the Q2BK menu. So I think that would only work if they actually copied and overwrote the stock Q2BK menu, which I don't want to do. I want it to only show up if they're using this shell. And so I'll go back here, and remember that command was O for offline reader? Key O, there we go. And it just calls message Q2BK. And so what we need is to tell Synchronet to automatically use that subdirectory of text menu for finding the menu files. And there's a way to do that. It's like menu dir, set menu dir. Let me see here. Set menu file overrides the menu file. So I wonder if we can just do set menu dir, and then I'll just say OVB2. Okay, menu, Q2BK support. Woohoo, look at that. We can use a clear screen code on that menu file, but at least it's displaying now. And now I think, yeah, the subdirectories aren't working now. So yeah, once we call that function set menu dir, no, none of the menus are working. Batch? Yeah, none of the menus work. So once we call this set menu dir thing, it really kind of hoses stuff up. So let's clear it with that command afterwards. We go O, whoops, no, message, O. Okay, that worked, Q2BK, yep. All right. So that's a trick for basically setting like a subdirectory of text menu for an internal command and to pull that Q2BK menu from there. That works pretty cool. I'm not really sure if all the features work. Like I think, you know, some of these things look for files that we didn't create, so we don't have a donations thing or there was something about sysop wants. Maybe that was under file. Transfers. X. Sysop wants lists. Yeah, no particular files are being sought. All right. But you can see it kind of works. And this is, again, like I said, on a Windows instance of Synchronet. So let's take it. We've already built everything, same system. We will log in on a Linux node and see how that works. So first thing we do is get an error. So we can see here it's trying to open the lowercase file naming of OVB2, yet the file itself is uppercase. So I guess I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was pointing out that the file name was uppercase. And we fixed that just by renaming OVB2.source to OVB2-source. I think that'll work. .bin and then rebuild it. I could have renamed the file. That would work fine too. But at least now they're lowercase, so it logs us out if we can't open the command shell. So that's a pretty fatal error. We'll log back in now that we got the right file case. And no menu. So it executes, it logs in, but there's no menu. I alluded this, again, problem before as well. The use of backslashes in the paths, in particular in all these menu commands, where we see OVB2 /main. That only works in Windows. However, a / works both in Unix and Windows. So we just want to go ahead and change that everywhere. And it worked on DOS as well, just as long as it wasn't from like a command line. You couldn't actually type at the command line a / path, but you could use it from a programmatic level. That always worked fine in DOS as well, which, you know, a little bit confusing, but we'll go ahead and replace all those to / and rebuild. Confirm our file names again are lowercase. They are. Log off, back in, And yeah, now it displays the menu file because we're using / instead of \. And I'll demonstrate this will work as well on Windows. You can see it's a Windows version for Win32. And likewise, the menu files work fine as well. It seems like it's in a pretty good spot now. It's working on Linux and Windows. The menus are working. Most of the commands look okay. Some of them could use like an additional new line or maybe a clear screen, like I alluded to on the QWK menu here. Could have a clear screen to be more consistent with the other menus. Pretty easy to add that, if you edit it with an ANSI editor. But that kind of brings up the point that, these menu files are really for ANSI. If I change my terminal settings, and we'll go ahead and do this, we'll say not use. And we're not UTF-8, and we don't have ANSI, and we're not PETSCII, and yeah, sure, extended ASCII. All right, let's see what they look like. So now it's going to take that ASC file and translate it for us. But you can kind of tell now that wasn't well tested. It has a lot more blank lines at the end. So if you wanted to use those ASC files that come with this shell, you would want to fix those. But ideally, we wouldn't need a separate set of files. So what we really want to do is translate those ANSI files, and having separate files for every different terminal type. I mean, if you really have the time to do that, you can, but it's unnecessary in this case. We could have a single file that would look at least this good when there's no ANSI capability, and then identically when there is ANSI capability, and just have a single file. And the way you do that is with a Control-A file or a .msg file, or it could also be called .asc, but .msg is preferred. And we can do that by using Pablo Draw. You might think, oh, if you know, there's a utility that comes with Synchronet called ANS to ASC. However, if we try to use that on these menu files, ANS to ASC, and we'll just do, say, main.ans. You see there's errors here, unsupported ANSI code. So this file has animation sequences, and it's trying to move the cursor up and even to the left in some places. So whatever ANSI program they used to create this, it wasn't super optimized. I mean, it's not obvious when you view it, but it's actually bouncing the cursor around up and down, and you can't convert files like that to an MSG. What you can do is open it in Pablo Draw, and I have that same file here open. Let me back up a little bit. So why do we want to do this? Now, you say, oh, it's working fine with ANSI. I only care about ANSI users. Okay, but you might have non-ANSI users, and then what are they going to see? We kind of saw that with the ASC file. If we called back, let's say we put this in PETSCII mode. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll go 80 colon PETSCII just to be nice. So you can see here it's not colored because it's pulling up that ASC file for a PETSCII terminal. Ideally, we'd want this to be color. And the way you do that, again, is by not using a .ans file to begin with. Or, if that's all you have, you convert it to a .msg file. And then that would get converted by Synchronet on the fly to the equivalent PETSCII commands. Another problem might be for wide terminals. So we didn't test this with wide terminals. Let's do that as well. All right. Yeah, actually, it doesn't look bad. Some ANSI files don't look great when you use it on a different, other than 80 column exactly terminal. If it's a little bit wider, they might barf out, but this one seems okay. It's not the end of the world if you went with these ANS files, but like I said, ideally we want to convert them to MSG, and then we would get a better non-ANSI experience. So let's go ahead and use Pablo Draw and pull up that main file here. We'll say edit, and then all we're going to do is just save it. So save as, and then we're going to call it main.msg. And then once we do that, we shouldn't need the ANS file or the ASC file. So we'll just make a directory called old, and then move main.ans to old, ASC to old. So all we have is that main MSG file now. And if we go back here, quick. Yeah, see, it's displaying just fine. That's the main.msg file that we saved in Pablo Draw. And now if we log off and log back in with PETSCII, look at that. Yeah, isn't that much better? See the benefit we get? So we want to do that with all the ANS files, and you only have one file to maintain. You can open that same file, that MSG file, back in Pablo Draw, and just when you go to save it, it'll automatically know to save it with Control A again, and then you'll get better support for other terminals. And we don't have one file to edit, so we don't have that issue where like one of the files has a bunch of extra line feeds and we didn't realize it because we're not testing it. Got a single display file, it likely will display correctly in all the other terminals. And if you want to know MSG versus ASC and what all that means, the wiki has a good breakdown of that stuff. So it's under customization, and then menu files explains that ASC files would take precedence if the terminal didn't support CP437. Otherwise, MSG is preferred, and usually, yeah, that's what you want, unless you really, want to support terminals that don't even support CP437 character set, then, you could have a separate ASC file. But Control A characters in both cases for color and any other terminal control sequences, which is a subset of what's supported by ANSI, and can be converted very nicely to PETSCII, and also UTF-8 terminals. This is going to support UTF-8. You can see here it was automatically detected. So it's wide, it's UTF-8. All right. Now it's converting the CP437 to UTF-8, but you can see it looks great. All right, so the next step would be taking this Baja source file and converting it to JavaScript, and mainly using the shell lib functions that are here and kind of following the pattern that I started with this default.js. So if you have another shell that you want to modernize, look at default.js on, sort of its pattern. Go ahead and copy and paste whatever you like. But this will be the pattern I'll be using to create a modern version of this Oblivion 2 shell. But this is a good starting point. The shell seems to be working, pretty much as it probably did with version 2.0. I take it back. There's a few exceptions here that just remembered. So let me see. User list. That kind of works. It could use a new, yeah, that works. But I think recent calls, that does not work. So this logon.list file is kind of an obsolete, deprecated thing. So if we look at the most recent default.src, so the Baja version of the default shell, and we look at like logons today, user list logons, there was a function called user list logons, and so we can actually do that there. Let me see. So where it's calling logons.list, instead we'll call that function. Just comment that out. Rebuild. All right, so the command we were testing was this recent calls. There we go. So yeah, and then there's another one. Well, the BBS list isn't going to work because I'm trying to run a program called SBL. That was the default BBS list. Now it's called SBBS list. So that's another thing we'd want to change. Ideally, that would be a configuration option. You wouldn't have to like modify the source for the script, but we'll go ahead and go with the existing pattern for now and just update that. For at least the default is SBBS list, no longer SBL. Upload and download to user file. Show libraries. Okay. Yep, seems to basically work. What is here? Toggle new scan. I don't think that does what the person thought it did. Yeah, we need to check out what Oblivion 2 actually did with that Z command. New scan to you. Yeah. All right, well, like I said, the next step is really to kind of rewrite this thing in JavaScript, but use the same menu files and kind of create the same structure and layout. But I'll probably go ahead and commit this SRC file to Git just so people can compare and see what it takes to modernize a Baja command shell, at least. And then I'll take it to JavaScript, probably make another video about that. So thank you for listening. This was fun. I hope it was informative to you and you make some more modern shells for Synchronet. See you later.